Samantha, I'm so thrilled to talk to you. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me on. So excited to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on. I'm really excited to glean your wisdom as it relates to sustainable family travel. But before we talk about any of that, tell us who you are, what you do, and how you found yourself so passionate about sustainable family travel that you have a blog about it.
Well, my name is Samantha Runkel. I am a writer. I'm a mom, obviously, and I'm a traveler. But before I was a traveler, I was a musician, a recording artist from the States, and I happened to meet my husband while I was traveling on an expedition ship in Antarctica about 10 years ago. And he was a travel photographer from Germany. And I ended up following him around the world, dropping everything. And we ended up traveling through, I guess, 80 countries together as it stands today, and half of them with our two kids. So we have really built up a beautiful, beautiful life itinerary of trips and travels and experiences through my husband's work. And through all of that, of course, I was able to discover a lot and glean a lot of wisdom about what is happening in the world, not only from an experience, as a family traveler side, but also about what is happening with our planet and what are ways that we can possibly what can we do as family travelers and explorers of this world to contribute and make the world a better place, for not for us but for our kids. So this is why I started this blog. It was to share the information I've gathered as a travel mom and also as a person who really cares about the planet and wants to leave it in a better space for our children.
Well, you did mention there that you've traveled to 80 countries with your husband. And so that is the perfect lead in to my first question, which is I bet a lot of people listening right now are saying, wait a minute, how can you traverse the globe and also consider yourself eco conscious? Remedy that for me.
Yeah, exactly, right? Carbon footprint not. That's true. I didn't start off. Obviously, my husband is one of the most traveled people in the world. I think there really is a list, and I think today he is number two on the list. But what he does for his job, I have seen, he documents the most remote landscapes and some of the most remotest tribes in the world that, as I'm looking at it, as mostly as a documentarian, who knows if this will be existing in the next 20 years or how this will kind of change. I think his work is extremely important. And I've always approached, as I traveled with him, that as an educational experience. And so the first time that I ever traveled with him, when I first met him and I went around, I approached it as that, and how can I also be part of that kind of solution and contributing to making the world a better place? We're obviously travel more than most families, but through some of that jet setting, as you would say, a lot of the things depend on when you land and when you get to your destination. There are a lot of ways that you can actually contribute and better the communities and landscapes and wild places around you that actually make it more sustainable than even your day-to-day living. And that's what we try to do once we're getting to a destination.
Well, in an email you wrote to me, you did mention how, 1 in 10 people around the globe rely on the tourism industry to survive. So, in some senses, when we're traveling, we are putting our money in communities who may very likely need it. Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely, and that's one of the tenets. So, I mean, sustainability as we know it is, not only leaving a place as you left it or leaving something as you left it, but actually trying to improve it around you. And so what I always say is sustaining our planet also means sustaining the people and the landscapes that inhabit it. And it's also important that we come and we visit some of these places because our powerful travel currency can contribute to 1 in 10 people that are surviving on the tourist economy. Unfortunately, when you do go and visit a destination, 5% of the money normally that is being given to a place is left in the communities. The rest is going out to larger international chains and so forth. And that's a shame. And that is why if you're kind of reframing the way that you're looking at travel, that you can keep a lot of the money in the communities, and you can be contributing to certain practices in those communities and supporting them personally. You're really actually benefiting the entire ecosystem there.
What I like about your response there is that it pushes back against the narrative that uh, travel that requires an airplane is always bad. It's always inherently a negative, right? And so I hear you pushing back against that. However, the fact does remain that air travel, airplanes, the carbon that's emitted from these gas guzzlers, for lack of a better word, these uh, what am I trying to say? We'll just leave it there. Um, is a sig is a significant uh, is a significant provides a significant negative. What am I trying to say? The air travel is bad for the planet. There's no getting around that. So how do you reduce your impact when you fly by air?
Well, the first thing is to reframe if you even need to fly. Yeah. I mean, we are in our family, we live in Europe. We're doing a lot more non-fly travel. We're doing a lot more train travel and more travel by vehicle. Here in Europe, there's a lot more initiatives happening that are incentivizing travelers to kind of see Europe, which is actually so beautiful from the ground. You know, train travel is a great way to see this part of the world. I think as well here, there's an initiative in Germany that they're going to stop with short haul flights altogether. So that's great. So there's really just this kind of push towards let's try and do it from a more holistic way. Let's not get on the plane if we don't have to. That's not to say that we should never ever fly again, because like we just talked about, once you do go to a destination, there are a lot of wonderful things you can do to contribute to a place. But yeah, the one thing is to kind of look at it as far as, do we need to get on this plane? Could we take the train? Could we instead stay home and just explore our own backyard, explore our own neighborhoods with new eyes? Because a lot of change does start in our community too, in our own community. And that's another way that we can reframe kind of being curious about the world and exploring. Slow travel is a wonderful way to look at it, which is taken from the slow travel movement in the 1980s in Italy. I think that was kind of against a protest against McDonald's, and it's about savoring the moment and being more regional and intentional with kind of the foods that you were choosing to eat. If you're kind of looking at that as travel, that's a way that you can approach that, exploring your own backyard a little bit more inquisitively.
Hmm. Well, going back to your point with regard to asking yourself, do you really need to fly? I think that's an important question that we all get in the habit of asking ourselves. I know in Europe, where you are, your infrastructure is heads and shoulders above what it is here in America. Side note here is one of my happiest memories after graduating college was getting a Eurail pass and just traversing Europe by myself. It was a lovely experience. I'm not sure if that's possible here in America, but I do think it is possible for us to ask ourselves, do we really need to fly? Could this be a road trip? Could we take Amtrak? Could we take a train and make the journey part of the family experience? And we're going to talk about road trips later, but you did mention slow travel there. And I want to talk to you more about that because, in my view, one of the most practical ways to satisfy a love of travel and also not, willy-nilly take airplanes all the time is to take, one long trip every few years as opposed to taking multiple shorter trips every year, let's say, because you are significantly cutting down on air travel. Can you talk to me more about slow travel? Like, I love the term. I love the connection to slow food, but how does it work in daily life, especially here in America, where most working professionals do not get 4, 6, 8 weeks off at a time?
Well, you can still approach it even on a long weekend. I was back there. I come from California, and we were there over the holidays. And we did this great road trip through the Southwest. And we went to some of the national parks. And we went to the Valley of Fire, which is a state park outside of Nevada, and Joshua Tree. And this is just a beautiful, beautiful place in the world to visit in the wintertime. Have you been into the desert? Oh, it's the reason why it's so great. It's not overly hot for the kids. You know, you can get out with your winter jacket, and it's just surreal how beautiful the landscape is. And there are so many just within short distances of one another, these beautiful places to traverse and hike. And one thing I saw really was lacking was there weren't a lot of local American, citizens traveling around. It was mostly out of towners and tourists from abroad who were there to see the sites. And I said, that's such a shame because a family who lived in Los Angeles could just take a long weekend or one of those Fridays off, and you could get so much done just via, car trip, stay in a little bed and breakfast out there, and go and see some of these beautiful sites within the day, and really kind of get home by Sunday night where you can get back to work the next morning. I think that that's totally possible, that if you just are looking at opportunities, what exists right outside of our city borders in the States, there's so much out there. And I think our COVID and our pandemic time has allowed us to really sit down and slow down and kind of look at really what is there in our near, and how we can kind of explore that more. But I hear you. I mean, I know that time is absolutely a factor in the United States. Here we have a lot of time off.
Well, so it's so funny you say that because my husband and I were talking the other night, and he said that one of the perks of his job is after you've been there for a while, they give you a sabbatical, a 6 week, do whatever you want sabbatical. And I said, oh my goodness, that's great. Like, when does yours occur? Yeah, it's in like 8 years. Yeah, I think you have to be at the company for 18 years to get that perk. So in 8 years, we will perhaps be able to take advantage of that. But you bring up a really important point there with regard to exploring what's in our backyards. I mean, I don't know if listeners listening right now are in the habit of truly exploring where they live. I live in New England, and it's a beautiful place, but I can often feel as though, I'm sick of New England. I want to go somewhere else. I want to see something new, explore something new. However, your answer there reminded me of the fact that there are so many places within driving distance or train distance or public transportation distance that I have never seen in my own geographic location. So that's a really great reminder. I want to transition our conversation into minimalist packing, because when we're packing minimally, we are first of all saving ourselves lots of headaches. In my opinion, I bring nothing on vacation, backpack and I'm done. But I know that I know I can wear the same shirt multiple days and feel really good about it. But I know for a lot of people that's really hard. So first of all, why should we pack minimally? How can we be less wasteful, less burdened on our next trip?
Yeah, well, obviously less weight is less weight, right? And so especially if you're getting on an airplane, that actually does count for lightening your footprint. If you're getting on a plane, is to kind of bring as little amount as possible. And that's why they would also say you have a lighter carbon footprint if you're flying economy, because you're not taking up so much space. But of course, as a mom, you know that you have to carry a lot of things. It's easier on everybody. But I've also found that not only the physical aspect of carrying things is easier on us, but actually the kind of spiritual, philosophical aspect of less is more. You can apply that to your kids, and it kind of opens you up when you are traveling and in that journey mindset to use your environment more for your children to explore and not depend on those coveted toys that they always needed back home or so forth that you thought you would have to bring. Because when I took my first trip, I think when my daughter was a little baby, I was going back to see my mom in California, and I brought all of these all of these extra items that I realized you could just either repurpose it on the airplane or just not use it at all and use your creativity to kind of change that up. So that's one way that you really can get from place to place, and you accumulate things along the way. I'm sure you've done that as a mom on a trip. You know, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
I love using travel as an experiment to see how little do we truly need. Like, what's the bare minimum of items that my family needs for this week vacation, let's say? Like, how low can we, how little can we bring? I think if you reframe the packing in that way, it can be a learning experience. It can be an eye opening experience for not just the packer, which tends to be me, but also the kids to see all the excess, all the extra stuff is frivolous. All we really need to live for an entire week, we can fit in this backpack. That is a strong visual. Samantha, I'd love to transition this conversation into your best thoughts for being more eco conscious on our next trip. I know that there are green booking options on our favorite websites when we go to book our travel experiences. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so they've just implemented, I think for sure in the States, a lot of them have been implemented since 2022. But if you are searching for a flight via Google Flights or an Orbit, Skyscanner, which we use over here in Europe, uses it, and as well as booking.com if you're looking for a hotel. Most of these travel and hotel search engines you can use a green option, which is a filter that selects either the lowest carbon footprint. Even Google Maps you can now search when what's the route that I can get that's going to be the least impactful on the environment, and that's just via car. Or what kind of hotel I'm going to be booking, what kind of green initiatives do these hotels have, how are they treating their employees, and what kind of practices do they have. I would take it a step further if you're trying to book a trip, let's say abroad, and you can even call up the hotel or send them an email and really ask them what kind of eco practices they have, just to make sure that they're not greenwashing it, because that's a really important part of, if you are taking the time to fly somewhere and book a big trip, is that you're also staying in a place that is doing good by the community there.
Well, yes, I know that you are a big advocate for actively practicing regeneration on your trip, on your holiday, on your vacation. What does that look like, though, for a family with children?
Well, absolutely. So if you're taking the time to book, 4 or 5 of you on a plane, and you get yourself across the world to explore a different continent, there are so many different things that you can do, and a lot of wonderful hotels I know are implementing these into the kind of their itineraries that you can have on site, and you can get into the community. You can join a local beach cleanup if you're going to a beach destination, for instance, which I think that's such a great idea. I love beach cleanups. I think it's an amazing way to learn about a destination, because you're meeting the community, you're meeting people, you're also outside, and you're also being productive with your kids. We do it all the time here in Nuremberg, and it's just a wonderful way to really learn, not only about the place that you're living or the place that you're visiting, but you're making obviously a positive impact on the people around you and, of course, your city. There's also, coral reef restoration projects. If you're going to a tropical island paradise, a lot of these wonderful hotels are implementing that, where you learn about coral reef restoration and why we're having coral reef incidents and bleaching incidents. So that's perfect for kids to kind of get their head underwater and explore and see what they can do. And I mean, this is going to be a planet that they're going to have to be helping regenerate in the future. So this is so great. They can also do it on holiday. If you're not living by the ocean, that's a great way to explore it. And there's tons of things that you can kind of do while you're on holiday to just, take that extra step to really learn or meet uh, people who are living there via artisan textile making classes and cooking classes. These are other ways to really kind of learn from that one-on-one experience.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where we're going. It doesn't matter what the goal of the vacation is. Maybe it is to relax and unwind. Maybe it is to see a new place. But regardless, there's always an opportunity to infuse a bit of learning with our children, alongside our children, regardless of where you go or whether you just want to sit on the beach all day. If you actively plan one morning to join a local beach cleanup, or if you actively plan one day to support some other initiative in the destination you're going, that can go a long way for teaching your children about environmental issues that are popping up, rearing their heads in other areas of the world. I have to ask you, we're still on air travel. We're going to move on to a road trip in a little bit, but going back to air travel, one of the most frequently touted ways to be a responsible traveler is to purchase carbon offsets. I want to ask you your opinion on this because I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't have the knowledge to back up my thoughts. So, what are your thoughts on carbon offsetting your air travel?
Well, yeah, there it is a large swath. I think it's a band-aid, of course. We don't need we we have flown probably more than most families on planet Earth. So I'm the best person to say I have, if anyone should be purchasing carbon offsets, it would be the Runkel family. And we do, and and we are actively looking at other ways of how we're exploring the world. But it's not obviously the telltale, the end all solution to everything. Although there are some really cool new technologies that are coming out that I believe that as we should be aware of what we're doing, and when we are getting on a plane, there are beautiful new green technologies like carbon capture that we support. One of them that's based in Iceland, where I feel like it's important to also kind of invest into our futures and these new technologies. Not to say that now we can just go and fly wherever we want to go, but to look at those options for the future simultaneously as we're cutting back, I think it's an important thing. I did an interview with a UN climate scientist for my website, and he is based in Finland. And I asked him this question because I also don't know about carbon offset. I said, "What do you support carbon offsetting?" And he does rewilding and reforestation. Rewilding and reforestation is letting nature kind of repurpose itself naturally with a little bit of help of with human contact. So that would be reintroducing native species to an area that humans have kind of degraded over time, and they're doing a lot of that right now in Europe. And he is one of the most well-known rewilders up in Finland, and he helped write the last two IPCC reports. He's just an amazing man, and he said he is not siding with a carbon offset program. But what you can do is you can mutually support a rewilding or reforestation program. And there's a lot of those you can do to just kind of donate and give your miles or give your miles spent over there because you're doing something at least while you're doing this. I think it should be two of the same. Yeah. Reduce your carbon footprint, try to fly less, try to not fly as often, and support these initiatives. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you. I liked your comparison to carbon offsetting to being a band aid. I think that carbon offsetting without any intentionality behind reducing your air travel to begin with, it needs to be both. There needs to be a combination of intentional reduction and carbon offsetting in the times during the opportunities when you cannot eliminate. And so I think in a lot of ways, carbon offsetting suffers from the same problems that recycling does. We just say, oh, it's okay, I'm recycling that plastic, or oh, it's okay, I'm flying all the time because I'm offsetting it. And so I think we really need to, again, combine that offsetting or that recycling or whatever the quote unquote eco-friendly behavior is with a bit of intentionality and good old fashioned reduction. Like reduction is never glamorous or pretty, but it's really darn important when we're talking about issues around sustainability. Okay, so I have so many more questions for you. The next is, it is probably a surprise to no one that when we're in a new locale, let me say that again. When we're in a new locale, it's really important for us to be smart, be intentional. I'm using that word again about where we put our money. Talk to me about that. Where should our money go when we're on holiday?
Yeah, so like I said at the top of this episode, is that 5% of our travel currency goes in, that stays in the community, and the rest goes out. And that is such a shame. So you can see that around the world. If you see cruise ships, for instance, if you decide to take a cruise, most of these cruise ships have deals with one or two of the shops on the whatever destination that they're coming to. They tell people not to support the locals. They have deals with drivers. So many of these taxi drivers and local artisans and people selling all of their wares, which is their only way of supporting themselves, are completely cut out of the profit. It is a shame. And not only that, the people who are coming on these cruises are having no opportunity to actually talk to some of these people in the local community of the place that they're visiting. It's as if it's just a floating city going from place to place, and they're not. You could just be floating in the middle of the ocean. It just it breaks my heart, because we've seen this from the ground. I've never been on a cruise. I've only traveled with my husband, from this documentary and travel photographer perspective, where we actually stay with some of these people, and you hear firsthand that they are just being cut out of this opportunity to survive and thrive. And if we were, as you said, more intentional with where we're putting our money, spread your dollars around. If you want to take a tour guide somewhere, if you're going to some place, how about a tour guide on one day and another tour guide another day? Because these guys or these women are taking the money back to their own families, and that is benefiting them so immensely. When you buy souvenirs, when you eat in restaurants and cafes, go out of your hotel and go to the little cafe on the corner, because that is really just, that is the best way that you can help the community right around you, is directly supporting them. And of course, like we talked about, which hotel you're going to stay at, try and stay at a place that you could call them up and find out how long these people, maybe it's someone who's been running a hotel there for generations. You definitely want to support that. They know what's going on. They'll hook you up with a great tour guide. It's like, that is the reason why we travel, isn't it? Otherwise, you can still go and relax and have a great time. And I think there's so many options this day and age to have the best of both worlds. You can go have a wonderful, relaxing holiday and be mutually supporting the people and the places around you.
Yes. And when we support the people who live all year long in our vacation destination, we're getting the most out of our travel, right? I mean, I have been on a cruise, to your point, and it is a carefully curated experience in which you do the excursion the boat tells you to do. You don't venture very far onto the island or wherever you are. And I feel as though in instances in which we travel, but we don't interact with the community, where we perhaps stay at the chain hotels restaurant for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we perhaps may be selling ourselves short, because the purpose of going somewhere new is to fully, or in my opinion, the purpose of going somewhere new is to fully immerse myself in the experience. So I want to transition our conversation, Samantha, into your best tips for taking a family road trip. And I should say that the thought of taking a road trip with my children sounds like a nightmare on earth. But for listeners who think that sounds like a great idea just in time for summer, how can they take a family road trip that's not completely wasteful?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great ways, and it comes down to just the basic logistics of getting the car tuned up, right? I never thought about that. I'm not really a car person, as I should be, but that was something that I read. I said, "Oh, that makes sense." There's just these little ways that, if you can integrate what you do in your daily life, which you think you kind of apply that to your road trip, it makes it so much easier. I'm sure most people who are listening right now are thinking through that, and thinking through how can I minimize, how can I be a little bit more sustainable in my day to day. If you take those concepts and apply that, not only do a road trip, but also a huge round the world trip or world travel like what we do, um, I'm bringing the same things in my backpack. I have my same reusable water bottles and my reusable straws and my little reusable baggies that everybody around you, when they see you're using it, it's like, oh, what are those cool things that those people are using? Like the straw. The straw is the coolest toy on any airplane or any airport. It's like this kind of normalizing this sustainability mindset out in the world. And also on a road trip, all that stuff fits right into your backpack, and you just feel lighter for it. I feel like it's almost more work when you're going on a road trip and you have to stop at a 7-Eleven or whatever, and you're in, all the chip bags and all that stuff, and the water bottles are coming in, and then they have to all go out. And yeah, I just using what I try to use at home and importing that into a road trip situation or even a flying situation is just it just makes me feel better about us traveling as a family in general. So packing lighter, tuning the car up. Also, one good tip I read about was finding out where your recycling centers are. That's cool. You could just I'm always looking for that when you're packing up your stuff in the back of the car. Where's the recycling center? Just drop that off quickly. Also, the same application that it goes to world travel, trying to stay at mom and pops and eating at local restaurants, and just again, like slow travel, being inquisitive and curious about where you're traveling to, even if it's the next town over, and you're just doing a little local road trip, or getting out into the mountains or the desert, or in your case, up the coast a little bit to Mystic, Connecticut. There's probably a lot of amazing places that you haven't discovered in quite some time. And I think that's a really good way to look at taking a road trip and making fun time out of it. But I know the hours can be long with kids. I don't think there's any magical answer for that. 100,000, are we there yet?
What I'm taking from your answer there is that it's important to take your eco friendly habits, whatever they are, whatever we all do in our own homes that are working. Let's take those habits and continue acting in that eco friendly, eco conscious way on our vacation. I feel like in my life, it can be really easy to throw up your hands and say, oh, we're on vacation. It's a vacation from, the work associated with being eco-friendly. But what I'm taking from your answer is no, just keep doing what you're doing. Like steer the course. So
Yeah, and it's much easier. I mean, you can, even if you're on an airplane and just, you have your own water bottle, you just say, no, thanks for this extra thing. And everyone else looks at you around you and they're impressed and they're inspired. And that's the end of the day, how we actually make impact, right? Is by our normalizing what is sustainable and what is eco-friendly and making it part of the culture. And that's a good way to do it.
right. Because when we're acting in a certain way and we're somewhere new, we can potentially show others a different way of living. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. Samantha, tell us where my listeners can find more of you and more of your awesome sustainable family tips and tricks online.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we will be launching soon. It's heytara.travel, and that will be out this spring, and it will be resources, guides, tips, also interviews with some incredible change makers and just people out in the world that are doing incredible things for the planet that when we do travel, we can personally visit or just support virtually. And I also will be doing some personal consulting there if anybody had any questions about integrating sustainability into travel or even just traveling with kids. There's always some answers for that one.
Well, Samantha, I want to thank you so much for coming on. You've given me the travel bug. I always have it, but I've been doing no traveling because traveling with children is tricky. But you've, I think, done a really great job of showing us that travel with kids and doing it in an environmentally friendly way, that is all possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.